Today I'm talking to Paul Collins of Ford Street Publishing. He's the owner and operator of a small press publishing company, as well as an author and an editor. So he's definitely got his fingers in all the publishing pies. Welcome, Paul Collins.
Thank you very much.
Why did you choose publishing as a career?
I think I left school at 15, so back in those days you could do something like that and get heaps of jobs. I did. I worked for a metal polishing company. I worked for a metal work, like doing spot welding on air conditioners. I worked for it as a clicker's apprentice, that is making bags, Savoy leather goods they were called. So making luggage bags, and you'd have those little rivets and someone has to pop all those rivets and do all that sort of stuff. And worked on a farm, stacks of jobs, electroplating. And in the end I thought to myself, well, what am I doing? I finally got a job at 20th Century Fox in the dispatch. And they merged, or Metro Goldwyn Mayer merged with them. And all the Metro Goldwyn Mayer staff gradually left, including their dispatch managers. So at the age of 17 I was a dispatch manager, and this is in New Zealand. And I just thought to myself, well, where am I going now? I mean, I'd reached a dispatch manager's job. There was basically nowhere else to go. I could be a booker, that is, the person who books all the films out around New Zealand. I didn't think that was going to be good enough. And in the end I just thought to myself, well, work for myself. My father would always, well, not always, but most of the time worked for himself. And I thought to myself, what can I do? And I thought, well, how easy would it be just to publish? And of course that was the naivety of youth, but quite apart from that, all you needed really was money to start publishing. So I started publishing a magazine called Void, which at the time was Australia's only science fiction magazine. Now the fact is I'd never read science fiction, but that didn't stop me. What I did was I got an editor, I got an advertising guy, I got a copywriter, I had a printer who was willing to do a cheap job for me because he believed in what I was doing, and I had all these people around me with all this expertise. But one thing I learned back then is that someone has to be in control. You don't have to be a control freak, but someone has to guide everyone, keep everyone in line. And unfortunately I didn't realise that, so when I went off to work my night job, I was working at Ford Motor Company during the day, and this is in Brisbane, and I was working at nights at the National Hotel. So I'd get all these guys together at one of their houses, and then I'd leave to go to work, and behind my back they were all arguing and having disagreements, and just one by one all these people were dropping out. I didn't realise why. And in the end the editor, I won't mention his name because he did a few dirty things on me, but he sent all the things back and said, too many hassles. And of course I thought to myself, what are the hassles? So I sort of took over myself at that point. But I still had a lot of support from the big names in science fiction back in those days, and that I'm talking about Jack Wadhams, A. Bertrand Chandler, Frank Brining, David Lake. And I had quite a bit of support, and I think if anyone looked at those magazines by today's standards, they'd probably think that they were a bit shoddily put together, whatever, but considering everything, I think, I was publishing these stories and publishing some unknown people who had their first publication in Void. Lost my distribution through Gordon & Gotch with that, swapped to hardcovers. Mm-hmm. So every hardcover was basically 3 issues of the magazine. So I had about, 200 subscribers, which was a reasonable few. So they started getting hardcovers instead of issues of the paperback magazine. At that point I decided that I should be doing novels. And I published Australia's first heroic adventure fantasy novels, basically, in the 80s, way before Pam Macmillan discovered Martin Middleton, and what was it called? Circle of Light, I think it was called. They published his trilogy, I think it was, in about 91, 92. And of course they sold about 20,000 copies, and all the major publishers suddenly thought, fantasy, oh, what's this thing called fantasy? Here we go! And they all jumped on board, and of course everyone's got a major fantasy line now. But I was basically doing that 10 years before. Unfortunately for me, I had 2 distributors. You couldn't get major distribution in those days, which you can now. In those days you couldn't. So they just distributed their own books. And one guy went bankrupt on me, a crowd called Book People. And I don't think he really owed me any money, or I got my stock back, so that was okay. But another guy went bankrupt, he just disappeared. He took all my stock, owed me about $1,000. And I published A. Bertram Chandler's last novel, which was called The Wild Ones. In fact, I had the first edition of that. Of course, it sold overseas after that. And so he got all the stock of that as well. And at that point I thought, too hard. So I started writing. But that's basically how I got into publishing, just thinking, well, it's not going to be that hard if you can get people around you. I mean, you can start any business you like, really, when you think about it, if you've got people who know that business. You could start a concreting firm tomorrow if you knew concreters or people who knew something about the concrete. You just had to be the money behind it.
Yeah.
And that's all I was. I was the money behind it. Not that I was rich, but all my life, including right up until now, I've had 2 and 3 jobs at a time.
Wow.
So back in those days, before coming over here at the age of 17, 18, I was doing metal polishing with my uncle on a Saturday. I worked in 2 different theatres as an apprentice projectionist, and I had my dispatch manager's job at MGM. So even then I was doing three jobs at once. And of course I came over to Australia and I started doing the same sort of thing. So that was what funded the publishing.
Wow, that's huge. I mean, keeping down 2 jobs, let alone 3 jobs plus.
Well, the publishing was always a hobby. You know, I thought of it just as a hobby. I never had an office. I've never worked in a proper office, actually. Even in all my other jobs, I've never worked in an office. So air conditioning, I've never worked in air conditioning or anything like that. But no, it was something that I did basically, even when I was with Rowena, Corrie Daniels. Even when I was with her, we had a second-hand bookshop and we had a little office off the bookshop. So when I say an office, it was more like a storeroom with a desk. So we used to run the publishing from there. As an adjunct to actually working in the shop. So if there was no one in the shop, we might go into our so-called office and you know, do some work in there.
So you were making the most of every free minute.
Yeah, basically. These days the publishing is like a full-time thing, but so much has changed. Back in those days, you'd get a manuscript in, you'd do the editing, you'd give it to a typesetter who would have to typeset the whole thing, retype the whole thing. You'd proofread a couple of times, you'd give it to a printer, get the printer to deliver it to your distributor, and that was basically the end of it. These days with social media, you could spend your whole time, 40 hours a week, just on the social media aspect. I mean, there really is way too much for one person to do, and you have to decide, okay, am I going to follow this, am I going to follow that? I mean, there's Goodreads, there's LinkedIn, there's MySpace, Facebook, Twitter, so many things. I mean, if you dabbled in all of those, you just wouldn't have any time to do anything else.
No.
So you've got to choose the ones you want to do. But back in those days, you had none of those options. You could send a few books out to reviewers, but you know, that was about it. These days I send out about 50 books to reviewers. Those days I might send out 4 or 5 to the major papers. That was about it.
Wow. So things have really changed.
Things have changed dramatically since the internet. As I say to people, I could spend, in fact I just did, I spent a whole week trying to clear 240 or something emails out of my inbox, and they're all mostly work related. And I went up to Rockhampton to do some festivals up there in schools, and I thought, God, I've got all these emails in my inbox, I've got to start clearing them. So I spent, I think it was 6 days actually, just clearing emails, and when I left last week, I think I got that down to about 20, but that was the least amount of emails in my inbox in a long, long time. Meanwhile, of course, the unsolicited pile is building up. So I've got all these manuscripts that need to be read. I mean, it's just, yeah, it's quite bizarre. Basically because when you think of emailing today, I might send out about, I don't know, 20 or 30 emails in a day, you know, just average. How many letters did we write 20, 30 years ago? You might write 1 a day. In fact, a whole week might go by, and if you didn't get any letters in, you didn't reply to any, you didn't send any, you might write to a friend in England or New Zealand or wherever you might send a letter. In a week you might write maybe 4 or 5 letters. Maybe, not even that. These days, 20, 30 a day. Oh, well, that takes time.
Yes, it does.
So that's where all your time goes.
So are you still holding down other jobs, or is Ford Street Publishing your full-time day job?
Well, I've also got a speakers agency, so I represent, I don't know how many there are now, but 110, over 100 anyway, authors and illustrators, and I send them all around Australia. I work in with the Children's Charity Network, which is an organisation to help children, disadvantaged children, and they've got various strands of the charity, but I'm an ambassador for them. So they use Creative Net to send authors around. We've sent them to the Northern Territory, the Pilbara. We've got authors going out all over regional Australia, basically, all over the place. And when they all come in fact, I had an email in from Rob today from the Children's Charity Network, and he sent me a list of all the places that we've gone. There's like a whole list of all these authors have to be organised and sent off all over the place. That's part of what I do. I've still got the writing. This year I've written, I've sold 8 chapter books. So they're only about maybe up to 8,000 words, 9,000 words long. But I've actually written and sold 8, I think, yeah.
This year?
This year.
2013.
I've got 6 with Macmillan.
It's April.
Yeah. Well, when I'm talking within a year, I mean, you know, I started in late last year, maybe mid last year. I'm thinking within a year's period, not necessarily 2013.
Within the last calendar year. That's still an amazing amount of work.
Yeah. So I've got all those coming out. I've just been commissioned to do a Choose Your Own Adventure with Macmillan New Zealand. That is very hard, those Choose Your Own things. I didn't realise how hard they were. And a 70,000 word third book in the Maximus Black Files. Luckily, some of the stuff that I'm publishing now, not those chapter books, or one of those chapter books was sort of already written, but the other 7 were totally new. The Maximus Black Files were actually written years ago, first drafts, and had no luck with them, so they just remained in the bottom drawer until such time I started with Fort Street. So I'll put out the third book this year. Still need a lot of work on it. In fact, it's being edited and all these questions are coming in, so there's a lot of time involved, even though the first draft was written some years ago. It makes it worse in a sense, because now I've got to re-familiarise myself with the whole world, the whole galaxy, and it's all new to me, basically, because I've forgotten that was done years ago. I also do a bit of event managing, like these festivals in Rockhampton. I had a collaborator, Elaine Alston, also did she did the Rockhampton part of it, but I did the rest, like organising all the authors and all that sort of stuff. So I don't even consider that a job. That's all part of the publishing, promoting side, so far as I'm concerned. But yeah, it takes a lot of time.
Wow. Well, as we go through, we might come back to some of those points, because they're all relevant to other questions that I've got planned.
I've preempted you, haven't I?
Oh, this is good. You have foreshadowed.
Okay.
What does Ford Street Publishing bring to publishing that other publishers, small press, independent, and other large publishing houses, not provide for the publishing industry?
Well, I don't think any single publisher could actually answer that question honestly. You could sort of come out with all sort of waffle about, oh, well, this makes me so special. I don't think there's anything really so special about Ford Street, only as much that I'm possibly, I don't know for sure, but I'm possibly one of the very few authors who are actually running a publishing company and not just a vanity press. I mean, I have published, some years I don't publish anything of mine. I have published my own books, but I still don't consider that a vanity press, because I've had about, I don't know, 150 books published now, and about 145 of them were from other major publishers around Australia and overseas, so I don't really consider myself a sort of a vanity, can't get published elsewhere sort of author. But I think I bring to Ford Street the other side of publishing. In other words, I'm not just looking at, a major publisher has to look at the commercial aspect.
Yes.
Okay. Is this going to make us money? Hey, this is a fantastic book, but it's not going to make us any money, and they reject it. So Ford Street and other small presses take up that slack, and that's why I think it's important to have small press. As an example, Pool was the first book I contracted by Justin Darth. He does those extreme adventure books, among others.
I've been reading some books published by, it's either Allen and Unwin or Penguin.
They both
by
published them.
Justin Duff.
Yeah.
The
Extreme
World-
Adventure, probably.
no, the Lost World Circus.
Oh, that's his latest. That's
Yes.
his latest series, and I think that's Penguin. Yeah, well, I published a book of his years ago. Two major publishers, both you just mentioned, rejected it. I published it, and it was shortlisted for the Victorian Premier's Award. The reason they didn't do it, they didn't think it had commercial content. It didn't sell squillions. It's sold out its print run, basically. I think I've got about a box left. Another book, Crossing the Line by Diane Bates, rejected by major publishers. It was shortlisted for the New South Wales Premier's Award. And when you think there's only 3 books shortlisted out of every book published in Australia,
That's pretty amazing.
small press, and they're books that were rejected by major publishers. So what small press is generally, not specifically just Ford Street, but generally I think we bring that extra hope for these authors who, a lot of authors would actually just throw those books away or just keep them like I do in the bottom drawer somewhere and hope that someone might want them one day. But I mean, that in itself is a lesson. About 25, 30 years ago, I was going out with a Greek girl called Effie, and I remember we went to Warrnambool because I wanted to research a book. An agent had said to me that would be a great spooky place to do a horror novel. God knows why, but anyway, I took his word for it. We went off to Warrnambool, and I researched for this book. It's now called The Beckoning, but I forget what it was. Evil Intent, I think, was its original name. It was an adult horror novel. 25, 30 years down the track, I saw somewhere in Buzzwords, an online magazine, that Damnation Books in the US were looking for manuscripts, sending the first 3 chapters outline, which I did overnight. They got back to me, yes, we'd like to read the rest of this book. I sent it to them because it was just sitting there, and within 2 weeks I had a contract for it.
Wow.
So that's another persistence. Now that book was rejected by major publishers too. Who's to say whether it's going to do any good with Damnation? I don't know. I've got no way of knowing. But again, that's how things have changed. I mean, I would never have heard of them prior to the internet. So much has changed. I mean, you've got knowledge, you've got information just being thrown at you from all directions. And of course, as you get a bit older too, you don't process that information as much as you might when you were younger. So it's a shame really that we didn't have this like 30 years ago. These things would have been a lot different. But that's the way it goes.
Yeah. Can you describe a normal workday for you as a publisher? Is there such a thing as a normal workday?
Well, okay, just as a normal day, I have a Kelpie and a healer, both of whom we've met at the door. And
Neither of whom are actually with us at the moment.
They're being a bit bored at the moment. They think that nothing's happening in here. If you open the fridge or rattle the pots and pans around, you'd probably find the healer would be in here with a shoe in her mouth. That's her gift to you, but you've got to give her a gift back. God knows how she picked that up. I didn't teach her to do it. And fortunately, she doesn't chew on them. But okay, I get up in the morning about 7 o'clock, take the dogs for a jog for about half an hour, come back. I'm normally training in the gym 4 days a week. I train, and then I come in, have breakfast, might have a shower first, have breakfast, read the paper. Now by this time it's about 10 o'clock, so my work day starts around 10. Go to the computer, turn it on, see if there's any urgent emails. I normally address them first, and all the others start piling up. I might go to Facebook to see if I've got any information to upload to Facebook, and throughout the day I might edit a manuscript. If I've got something there that I've got to do, I could read an unsolicited manuscript, which hasn't been happening lately because too much has been on. One of the things that people don't realise is that when you have a book, you've got to schedule it with your distributor. And my distributor is doing them 2 months at a time. So let's say if you wanted something distributed in June, July, you'd have to let them know by about January. And the hard thing for a small press is knowing whether you're going to have the book in January, and it's got to be in the warehouse a month before. So let's say, well, in May, it would have to be in the warehouse on the 1st of May if it's going to be released in June, or the 1st of June if it's going to be released in July. Meanwhile, you've got to gauge how long it's going to take to edit, whether the author's going to get back to you in time. I mean, some authors take ages to edit. They've got other projects on, they can't be bothered. I've sold that book, I'm on to another one now, and it could take you 2 or 3 months to get a book edited. So that's one of the problems that you have when you're trying to schedule. So you've got to prioritise what you're doing at that particular time. That's one of the things that you've got to do during the day. So if you've got 2 books coming out, I could spend 2 weeks just proofreading or editing as those books are coming backwards and forwards. I mean, it's quite a lengthy process. When you first get that manuscript and you contract it, you do that first edit, they come back to you, then I might employ another editor, as I did with a series I did, Too Cool and Marcy. Phil Kettle, who you've probably never heard of, but Phil Kettle's quite a very popular writer for primary school, and so is Susan Halliday. So I did the series. It was such a huge series that I knew I wouldn't have the time to do it. So there is a lot to do with those books, like the whole editing. You've got to get illustrations, they've got to fit the pages, big job. So I've got a project manager on that one. But you've still got to keep an eye on that process. All that starts coming in. Hey, is this what you want? Blah, blah, blah. So I spent a lot of the time on the internet. So it's not just a matter of, like it was, I told you, 20, 30 years ago, you just get a manuscript, read it once or twice and edit it, off to the typesetter, off to the printer. Because I work from home, I can work any time I like. It's not as though I have to, it's not a 40-hour-a-week job. And I could work up until 11 o'clock. Mostly the stuff I do late at night would be on the internet, just social media sort of stuff that doesn't take too many brain cells, that you can just do on automatic, because you don't want to be proofreading at 11 o'clock at night. Because by then I've had 1 or 2 wines as well. And you don't want to miss typos before they go to a printer. It's the worst thing to have people write to you and say, did you realise you've got 2 spelling mistakes in your book? It needs to be better edited. And you think, well, lady, you didn't see it when I first got that manuscript. It had 200 typos in it. I've missed 2. Well,
pretty good. Pretty good hit rate. People
don't realise that when they read a book. They think, how could the publisher have missed this? Well, yeah, you've missed a typo, but you didn't see the manuscript when you first got it. And I think a major publisher once said in an interview, she was on a panel, she said that you can expect at least about 5 or 6, actually she said 7, which I think is a bit over the top, but she said 7 typos per book.
Oh, I've seen 7 typos in one spring, so I think you're doing really well.
Yeah, well, I don't think there should be 7. I hope to God none of our books have got that many.
Oh, no, this is not a Ford Street book I'm talking about.
I'd like to say it wouldn't be. Let's not be too big-headed. Somebody might go out there and actually read all of Ford Street's books just to prove me wrong. But I don't think there'll be 7 in any of our books. Maybe 1 or 2. That's unfortunate, but we do our best.
Yeah. And you've got the writing as well and the editing, so how do you balance all of those commitments in with this work day?
Well, if we're talking about the editing that I'm doing these days, let's see, I think I've got a copy here. This is Trust Me 2, which is a sequel to Trust Me. There's about, 55 stories in there. One's a novella by Isabel Carmody. They came in bit by bit, which was fortunate. It's not as though I had all those stories and I had to sit down and just edit all those stories. I also have interns who come in, so if there's a story that I'm having problems with, I'll give it to an intern if I've got one in at that time and say, look, see what you can do with this, and they might be able to decipher something that I couldn't quite decipher. So I do have sort of help every now and again. I've actually now, I talk about Ford Street being a one-person show. I do have an intern who, she's no longer an intern, she's now a publishing assistant. She is quite good, she comes in 1 day a week, so I do have one person. I have a staff member, 1 day a week, but she's very good for that sort of stuff, and she studied editing at a college or a university, so she's quite good too. So basically, whenever I have anything I'm in doubt with, she gets to run her eye over it as well.
Yeah.
With this anthology, as I said, these stories came in bits and pieces, so to edit a short story, most short stories might only take a few hours. You might just read it. Some stories are perfect the way they are. I'm not the sort of person that thinks, oh God, I have to leave my stamp on it. I'm sure there are editors out there who feel as though they have to fiddle with an author's writing to justify their job. And heaven forbid, most editors would say, that's not true, we only better their stories, but sometimes I don't think they do. And I can say that as an author. Quite often in the past, I've had editors, they actually make a mangle of your stories. And, I have sort of gone off my head a couple of times. And of course those young assistant editors and beginner editors are now senior commissioning editors in major publishing houses. And I think, how did they get there? But that's another story.
Yes, yeah. So what's the normal process of publicising a book? And you've got some books here to use as examples. So.
Okay. I think one thing that I like to think that you asked a question earlier on about what Ford Street can bring to the publishing world. And I think one thing that major publishers, and maybe to a lesser degree some smaller presses, they let themselves down by having this focus on their A-list. Now, something that most people probably don't realise is that major publishers, their publicity budget is commensurate with the advance their authors are being paid.
Yes.
If the author only gets $6,000, average $6,000 for a book, there's no publicity budget. And I've been told this. I had a book. I had 7 books with Penguin actually, and one of my books, I said, "Oh, we're going to do this, we're going to do that," and they said, "Oh no, your book doesn't have a publicity budget." And that's when I found out about this. You only got a $6,000 advance, and you want a budget for publicity as well. Now, if you get $35,000, like someone like Morris Fleitzman or Paul Jennings, someone like that, it's actually in their contract. So I'm told in their contracts that they've got a certain amount that they have to spend, and of course they want to recoup that $35,000. So they do go all out to promote their books. Meanwhile, the mid-list or the B-list, they get basically nothing. One thing a small press does, or certainly Ford Street does, is spends a lot of time on promoting everyone. I mean, I jokingly say there is no B-list at Ford Street. Every author's an A-list. So just to show you, we do trailers for all, well, I shouldn't say all of our books, we've done maybe about 15. Right now, I've got a competition on. It's the Ford Street trailer competition. It goes out to teachers and librarians. And all these, the idea is I've given a whole list of books here where students can make trailers, because I mean most kids these days seem to be interested in all that sort of stuff. Every school would be showing them how all this is done. So I've got about 20 schools involved in making trailers, and what I'm doing is giving each school a box of books for those that are that I actually use on the net, on YouTube, to promote the books. So basically they're getting a chance to experiment with something, they're getting a chance to do a trailer for a publisher, and what I get out of it for a cost of a box of books, I'm getting all these trailers. So we do trailers, that's just something I do.
And the schools that you're talking about, are they like primary schools and high schools?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah. Oh, anyone with students. I mean, universities could be involved if they saw it. One of the things I've got is various databases, and I think all up I've probably got about 17,000 emails addresses on various databases. I've got a marketing database, booksellers, municipal libraries, schools, that's got about 8,000 on it. My personal email database has about 3,200 on it. So I think if you add it all up, there's at least, I don't know, 15, 17,000, something like that. There's quite a few.
Wow.
So all of those people get author information sheets, which for the camera, that's an author information sheet. And on this author information sheet is the cover of the book, there's the ISBN, publication date, all the information you really need, the page extent, format, price of course. One of the things we did was for Trust Me 2, which I showed you before, is we did this little booklet. This booklet's got 3 stories from 3 of the authors, including Justin Dark. That's been shortlisted for the Aurealis Award, I noticed.
That little book?
No, the story. Stilled Lives times 11. So it shows it is a very good story. There's that, I think there's a Gary Crew in there, and Kerry Greenwood, I think. There were 3 stories anyway. So that went out to my database of addresses that I've got. There's about 1,450, I think, on that. So they got the little booklet to promote Trust Me 2.
And 3 very prominent Australian authors too.
Yep, and that was just a freebie, of course. Also for Trust Me 2, the first book, Trust Me, is Ford Street's best-selling title. That sold, I don't know, if you count the book, it sold to 2 book clubs. It sold about 6,000, 7,000 copies or something like that.
Wow, that's really good. In the Melbourne Writers' Festival last year, I attended a panel with the CEO of Writers Victoria, Text Publishing and Scribe, and they said for an Australian literary novel to sell 1,000 copies, it's doing really well. So to sell 6,000 of a genre book, you're doing really well.
Big difference with adult books and children's books. One is that children's books have got what's called book clubs. Book clubs can buy 4,000 copies. They get them for a huge discount. They get them basically 70% discount, 65%, 70% discount. But they can buy 4,000 in just one hit. There's a smaller book club. They'll buy about 400 or 500. So you could basically sell 4,500 if both book clubs buy a book, whereas they're not buying adult books. There's also a huge, in fact bigger market in education. If you count all the schools in Australia, I don't know, there's probably 10, 12, 15,000, I don't know how many there are. But there's, I don't know how many booksellers there are in Australia, probably 1,000, 1,500. And that's what you're selling to if you've got an adult book. You've also got municipal libraries, of course, but then with the children's books, you've got them as well. So you've got maybe 3 times the market.
Wow.
Children's publishing as you have the adult market. Now,
and yet people look down on children's publishing.
I've never quite figured out why we're doing better. In fact, a friend of mine was an editor at Penguin. He said the children's department was the only department one year that met its budget that actually did really well. And yet everyone would be going, oh, children's, ho-hum. The thing with children's these days is that you've got this YA sort of market. And the YA market, not only do you have all the education market and the municipal booksellers, etc., but you've also got all the adults who are buying YA. How many adults read the Harry Potter books, for example, Twilight, God knows, Hunger Games? They're basically children's books, but they're being marketed. I think there's a new term now called new adult. So they're sort of changing over from young adult to new adult. So you have got a much huger market. And of course, without children's books, the adults wouldn't be reading. If they hadn't been reading as children. So yeah, I don't know why people look down on children. Even as a writer, here's an example. When I announced that I'd sold The Beckoning, I had 184 likes on it and God knows how many comments. Now if I'd said I've just sold a book which I did a while ago called The Pranksters Club, I think I might have got about 30 likes. Now one's a children's book, The Pranksters Club, the other's an adult's book, horror adult book. That had 184. That was the last time I looked. It's possibly had more likes on it since then. But there's more people. What I'm saying is 4 times more people, 5 times more people interested in the fact that I've sold an adult book than they are I've sold a children's book, which I found quite odd. Here's another thing I did for Trust Me Too. This poster here. Now that went out to all the municipal libraries on my database, and of course the good thing about this has got pictures of all the authors. So even if people aren't interested in the actual book, it's got basically a stack of, you'll see a stack of speculative fiction writers there. There's Lucy Sussex, Sean Tan is there, Sean McMullen, a whole stack of people who also write. There's Ian Irvine, who write Kerry Greenwood.
Sean Williams and Michael Pryor.
Yes, exactly. And a few others. George Ivanoff is on there. And of course Gary Crew, Justin Darth, Deborah Bella. So all those people get on there. Isabel Carmody, of course. So that also went out in my little package. That takes, by the way, when I'm talking about things that you do and you ask me what the normal process of a day, there is no normal process because something different every day of the week. But when we do a mail out, now you might think, if you haven't done a mail out yourself, which you probably have, but for those people who haven't done a mail out before, sending out 1,450 envelopes stuffed with all this sort of stuff, that takes up to a week. And that's if you've got help. And it does, it takes a week. Because you stuff it all in, you've got to seal them all, you've got to put the address labels on. I also put stickers on, book cover stickers, which I'll show you shortly. You've got to put the stamp on, you've got to put the address, return address thing, and all these stickers. So by the time you peel them all off, we're talking about 4 processes of sticking alone, plus sealing the thing and putting them all in. That takes about a week. you'd probably find a major publisher wouldn't do that because they wouldn't see it being worthwhile. And maybe if they've got their money tied up in bigger, slots and marketing, that's fine, but that's something that is affordable. All you need is the time. And since I don't pay myself, I'm doing it free. But here's a little package that when I mentioned that I organise festivals. So I go into a school and we run a festival. And one of the things I give them as a rule, here's the Keys to Starvelt sticker. That's just the cover on a sticky. I did a series called the Hazard River series. So my printer does these up cheap for me. If he's got a print job and there's some wastage, that much wastage, I'll say to him, I'll give you X amount if you do these for me on your next job. If he's got a job coming up, he says, yeah, we can do them this size. I say, yeah, sure. Bang, so you get those cheap. Despite what major publishers tell you, bookmarks don't cost anything. My printer does them for nothing. They just run them off on the cover because there's a bit of wastage on the cover, and it just gets printed at the same time. My brother actually did this for me. It's double-sided because he was doing a double-sided job. As a rule, they're just one-sided, but it just gets run off with the cover and they just trim it. It costs them basically nothing. So we do bookmarks with every book. There's more stickers. There's a little card. A series I'm doing with Tanya McCartney, writing the Grumpy Wombat. So they worked as good little cards where you could write things on the back. More stickers. There's a sort of a card size thing that my printer said to me, I've got some wastage going up, do you want us to do a job? I said, here's the book cover to that. And the information sheet I showed you before, sometimes I do them in colour, so if I've got a spare one, I'll send that out. And of course they get the catalogue. This is an old catalogue, but I now have an order form in that, so when we do a big mail out, I also send that out, and all that is good promotion. That all goes to, as I said, mostly schools and municipal libraries and booksellers.
So this whole package,
Yep.
because you pulled it all out of this, is this a little show bag that goes to children?
Yeah, the catalogue normally isn't in there because the kids probably wouldn't, it would be just a waste, the kids wouldn't do anything with the catalogue.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just a little show thing that, kids get thrills out of doing all that stuff for nothing. And some of them might just throw them away, but I'm sure some of them actually keep them. And the schools get them, of course. Normally when you go into a school, I'm doing quite a few school visits. Normally the schools will buy some of your books. So that's another way of distribution that, I was talking about publishing 30 years ago. You never had that sort of access. And in fact, even with publishing literary novels or adult novels, how many schools would they authors go into? Possibly none. But with children's, we give workshops, we give talks about the writing process, etc. So I think that that's another avenue that we've got as publishers of children's literature, that publishers of adult books, they simply don't have that avenue.
And with your sending authors into schools, things like that, I notice you have Gracie and Josh there.
Yes.
I think I remember seeing something about Suzanne doing a tour, is that right?
Yeah, this is Gracie and Josh. Now that book was very interesting in as much that Suzanne contacted Variety, children's charity, and got on quite well with them and told them this was a book about cancer. The word cancer is not even mentioned in the book, so the book really is a sort of a metaphor for a cancer. Gracie's brother has it, and as you go through the book, he takes off, or his beanie falls off at one stage, and she gets quite scared. But together they get through the bad days. Some days Josh is good, and some days Josh is feeling bad. And it just takes you on a bit of a journey on, they make a film together, and of course it winds up pretty good towards the end. There's hope. There's always got to be hope in picture books. Yes. But Suzanne Gervais is quite the consummate self-promoter. She's very good. She goes into school, she'll give talks. Believe it or not, I'm sure she was already going over there, but she wouldn't have just gone over to England and America to talk about this one book, but she actually gave talks at big conferences overseas about Gracie and Josh and how important some of these books are. She also did another book for me called Ships in the Field, which is the immigrant experience. And the illustrator, Anna Pignataro, also had the same experience coming over. She was Italian and Suzanne is Hungarian. And just all the same experiences. They got them together and they created Ships in the Field, sold to 2 book clubs, and again Suzanne promoted it everywhere. Variety has turned out to be a real boon. They bought quite a few copies, and they also got their publicity department onto it and got Suzanne. She was staying with us here at the time, and she was getting phone calls all the time and emails telling her, okay, can you be interviewed on radio so-and-so and so-and-so, and she had all these radio interviews lined up. So by publishing a book like this, now major publishers, can't speak for all of them, but most of them wouldn't have even thought of getting a charity like that. In fact, I didn't, but my author did. If she'd said this to a major publisher, they probably wouldn't have even been that interested. But smaller presses, you've got to be open to a whole heap of things. And they really got behind it. I was a bit dubious about sort of even putting their logo on the back, but I'm glad I did now, because they gave us no end of publicity for that. Quite often, in fact, publishers seem to almost balk at the fact that their authors are doing some sort of publicity on their own. And beggars belief, I know, but I can give you an example. Sean McMullen offered to go over to America at one point. He wanted to go anyway to a convention, and he said to his publisher, Tor, that he would do book signings, and all he needed was an introduction to some of the booksellers. And they basically told him, oh no, that's not part of our marketing plan. Of course, I don't think they had a marketing plan. At least Sean didn't think they had a marketing plan, but here they have an author who's willing to go over into bookshops and actually do signings. They didn't want him to do that. Now, that sort of staggers me, because if my authors say to me, oh, we've got this book signing happening, I think, great, you know, I might sell a few copies. One of the things that does surprise me too, though, that quite a few booksellers don't actually encourage signings. And I think to myself, they've got nothing to lose. They get a couple of books in, you can hand sell books anyway, and the sale will return. They can return those books, even if they don't sell them. Author's going to get several people into their shop, they're going to advertise all their contacts. Someone like George Ivanov, who I've published 3 of his books now, the Gamers trilogy, he's always going into shops doing these signings, but some shops just say no. And I think to myself, what have they got to lose? He's going to tell everyone, he goes on Facebook, he's on Boomerang Books, he's got an audience of thousands of people. And if I had a bookshop and some author was willing to advertise to thousands of people, he was going to be in my shop, and even if I didn't sell a book, I've lost nothing. I'd be all for it. So some people are a bit strange. These posters and things that you send out to bookshops as well, most of them aren't really interested in merchandise, and I don't really understand that either. But there were a couple of groups like the Red Group, for example, and Leading Edge. They have about 300 or 400 booksellers as members. And I was in contact with both of these groups, and I said, can you let your members know that I've got these posters? And I think it was this one at the time, Trust Me Too. And I had one person, one bookshop out of all those people, we're talking maybe 700 booksellers, that was interested in some merchandise. And that was because it was in Nalini, and Gary Crew's in the book, and this bookseller said, oh, well, Gary's one of our locals, so I think he wanted 7 copies of the poster so he could give it out to his schools, I suppose. But that was the only response. So that's something else you're battling, you know, even though you've got what you think is all this really good merchandise, fact is a lot of people just don't even want it.
And with Gracie and Josh, you had those Cupid dolls.
Yes, the Gracie dolls. That was another initiative of Suzanne's. She actually paid to get those made up. I didn't do that. I bought 100 off her just to help out with the cost. But yeah, that acted as quite a good publicity gimmick. Like when we did the signing, she gave a doll out. Well, you were at the signing, or the launch, and she gave out a copy of every copy of the book sold had a Gracie doll with it. Yeah.
To me, that's just adds to the appeal, but you're saying that the bookstores aren't particularly interested in having the Gracie dolls.
No, and I also offered them to Macmillan. I forget how many Macmillan said they'd take, maybe 20 or 30. Merchandise is very fun. When and this isn't just with it's with most publishers. When Michael Pryor and I put together the Quintaris Chronicles, it was Australia's first shared world, and I think we did about 32, 33 books in all of the Quintaris Chronicles. Michael and I did these posters. We did these great big posters, thinking, oh, this is going to be fantastic. Macmillan's going to, because they distributed Lothian at the time, they're going to do all this and promote. It's going to be in all the shops. We had a rude awakening. We had the posters delivered to Lothian, and after about 2 days I said to Michael, have you heard from them? He said, no. I said, neither have I. Maybe they didn't arrive. We had the courier pick them up. And I had to phone Lothian, and the staff member there said, oh yeah, they're here, they're on the floor. And I said, oh, okay, I was expecting sort of, oh yeah, thanks for doing this, Michael and Paul. This is what I said to you before about marketing departments and Suzanne, if she had said to a major publisher, oh, Righty is on board. They don't seem to be interested. Biggest belief. But that's what happened. I don't think those posters ever went out. I never saw any anyway. The reps aren't that interested in taking all the merchandise. So you do get people sometimes say, oh yeah, we like merchandise, but I don't know where those places are, because from my experience, you can do a lot of this stuff, and it seems to go nowhere. It does with the schools, so when I say I do merchandise, I've got a specific purpose for it. I take it to schools with me. When I do a festival, we have maybe 300 kids involved. They all get the merchandise. It's hard to quantify how much good it's doing, but if you can get it done reasonably cheap, it's just one way of getting your product out there and the merchandise. And you're doing something, the authors appreciate it, because you are doing something for their book. And it's one thing I think that Ford Street does quite well. It's the marketing and publicity side of their authors, which I've had people tell me that I've done more for them than any major publisher. Again, probably because they're seen as B-list and they've got no publicity budget, so it doesn't take much to actually do something more than a major publisher is doing.
But you've talked about Suzanne is extraordinary.
Yes.
You've talked about a few other examples of like Sean McMullen going to America and book signings. Is there anything else that authors can do to help with the publicity?
Well, they go into festivals and they do all the workshops in schools, book signings. Social media is probably about the cheapest, quite time consuming of course, but they can go on and do blog tours. Quite a few of the authors do that, so they tee it all up over a period of a few days, and then advertise it through various online magazines like Pass It On, Buzzwords, and there must be stacks of others, Twitter and Facebook and stuff like that. So that gets good coverage that way. They can also have their own book launches and sell copies in that way. George Ivanoff's very good. He sells his own books. Quite a few authors buy copies from me at 50% discount, and then they sell them themselves. They can do signings and, as I said, go into schools and that sort of stuff. Approach municipal libraries. Quite a few of them these days aren't so autonomous as they used to be. In other words, you could go into bookshops 20, 30 years ago, or not bookshops, libraries, and they would buy them from you direct. These days they've got tenders out there, and you've got to be a licensed tender, and they've got their own suppliers. And quite a few of these suppliers these days are actually doing the whole marking, the barcoding for them and all that, all the library coding, so it just goes straight to the shelves. The libraries don't have to do it anymore. So if an author walks in with their books and I've just had this published, straight away they see work. This is extra work. And if they can get that book through the supplier, they may as well, because they're going to get it basically the same price with all their barcoding done, etc. So all they have to do is just stick on the shelf. So that does sort of take away some of that. But some libraries still do buy. Some of my authors buy, basically we're talking hundreds and hundreds of copies of the books. Those who go into the schools. George Ivanoff is a very good self-promoter. When he goes to conventions, he sells books, talks to people, networks. But they're basically the major ways, I think, of promoting their books. Quite apart from radio interviews, if you've got contacts with your radio people, quite often your local paper will give you a full-page spread. I mean, I appeared on the front cover of Melbourne Weekly, I think, or whatever it's called, Melbourne Times. with The Glass House, which is a picture book I wrote some years ago. You never know when someone might pick up on something like that, especially if you're just a local and they say, oh, you've had this book published, and they've got a white space to fill, away you go. So you can often get into your local papers too.
Oh, that's good.
Hmm.
Just scrolling down my list of questions here, you've answered a lot of them without me asking them, which is excellent.
Born talker, I guess.
Are there any key points or morsels of advice that you'd like to give to emerging writers or aspiring publicists?
Well, publicists, the easiest way to build up a reputation is by these blog tours and starting a blog yourself, and getting as many people on Facebook and Twitter as you can. I haven't really gone down the Twitter path so much. I think I've got about 800 followers on Twitter, 700 or something like that. But I haven't actually looked for those. Almost every day I get one or two people following me on Twitter. I don't even know how they find me, because I'm not really posting much on Twitter, but anyway, I get people following me. Facebook, I have actually in the past been active in getting librarians to join up, to follow as friends on Facebook, because they're quite important people, of course. They're the ones that buy books. One obscure fact is that on Facebook, I don't think I've really got many children followers on Facebook. Most of them are adults. But that's not a terribly bad thing, because it's the adults that actually buy the children's books. I don't see too many children going in and buying books. Most of them haven't got the money. These days they're $20, $25 each in a book, so they're not going to be buying them, especially picture books. So I mean, it is adults you want, but yeah, I don't see much of a following for children.
Are there any other aspects of your work at Ford Street, or your role in the publishing industry, that you'd like to mention?
No, I think we've covered. I mean, basically, people said to me, "Why did you start publishing again?" And the fact is, I started out as a publisher. I just returned to what I initially wanted to do. I spent, as soon as I stopped publishing, about 1984, I think, I started writing. I wrote a stack of probably about 140 short stories I've had published over the years. It wasn't until about 95, I think, HarperCollins bought or published The Wizard's Torment, and in the next 10-15 years I had about 140 odd 150 books published. So I was getting about 10-11 books or 10 books published a year for a long time. Mostly chapter book size. I'm not talking about big hulking books, but yeah. So when Macmillan decided that they'd distribute me, I approached them and I said, well, look, Hachette's now stopped, because Hachette took over Lothian and stopped the Quintaris Chronicles, and I said, well, I could keep publishing the Quintaris Chronicles, and they said, yeah, sure, we'll distribute here. So as soon as I had a distributor, I started publishing again. The first year I published 2. These days I'm publishing about 8 books a year. This year I'm publishing about 18, because of the box set, which had 10 books in the set, which is really way too many, but basically what amounts to one person. But quite a few opportunities I see come and go, which is a bit unfortunate, things that I could be doing that I can't do because of time restraints, but that's the way it goes.
Yeah. Before you actually talk about your different lists of books, is there anything else you'd like to talk about these other books that you've got on the table?
Possibly In the Beech Forest, which is this one here, Gary Crew and Den Shear. Sometimes with being a small press, you go to events and you see some art and you think to yourself, there's something I can do with this. This Den Shear won the Young at Art Award with the Children's Charity Network, of which I'm an ambassador, as I mentioned before. And I said to her, would you like to work with Gary Crew? She said yes. And came out a beautiful book. I mean, it's very well sort of designed, got a great design onto it. Who you might know, Grant Giddis. In fact, Grant Giddis does most of our books. And
so he's an actual professional book designer.
He is now. I'm the one that really got him into it. When I was publishing books in the 80s, he did about 3 or 4 covers for me. He was great with airbrush. We sort of lost contact over the years, and then when I started publishing again, I got back in touch with him, because he's got his own design studio now. He mostly does, from what I can see, catalogues and stuff like that. But I asked him if he'd like to do some book covers, and away he went. So he does. He doesn't do all of them, but he does most of them. He does all this design work, and I think he's learnt to do them. He's not actually a book designer as such, but he is now, but through all the experience with Ford Street. But Den Shear, unfortunately at the time she was sick and she was going through VCE and what have you, so this took longer than maybe it should have. But she came out with a brilliant lot of artwork. So Gary Crew, of course, has probably won the Children's Book Council Award more times than anyone. Equal, I think he's won it 4 times, so has someone else. So it's great to have him. It gives a bit of credence and credibility to a small press when you've got some major names. I've also reprinted one book, and that was Isabel Carmody's Greylands. That's gone quite well. Do you remember Nick Cave's band?
Bad Seeds?
Bad Seeds, yeah, but that came later. Back in the 80s, or late 70s, when Rowena and I were together in Berkeley Street, St Kilda, he and his band used to live downstairs below us. And they'd come home about 3 o'clock in the morning. They had a piano, and they used to run their hands along the bloody keys of the piano. And just to get my own back, sometimes I get box loads of books and wait for them to be asleep and throw them down the floor. Things we do. So there's a little Nick Cave story for you, a little anecdotal story from Nick Cave. So, there's that bastard who threw those heavy objects down on the floor above us when we were trying to get some sleep. But yeah, they used to wake us up about 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning and go ding as they walked past. So there you are.
Well, as an author, you've written a ton of books. I was going through your website and the list was surprisingly long.
Yeah, I haven't added to it for a while either. It'd probably be even longer if I did. I haven't been to the Paul Collins site for about a year. But
okay, right. Well, is there anything that you'd like to tell us about some of the major works? I mean, obviously there's not enough time to talk about everything, but talk about some of the major ones, maybe the ones that are still in print.
Yeah, well, quite a lot of the bigger ones are still in print, like the Quintaris Chronicles. I think most of those are still in print. That was the shared world that Michael Crowe and I put together. Very basically, I think Michael didn't sell the idea. He had the idea initially, and he couldn't sell it. And I was with Lothian. I'd had quite a few books with Lothian. He said to me, "Oh, do you want to collaborate on this?" And maybe we'll approach Lothian. So I said, "Yeah, sure." So we had a meeting with Lothian. They said, "Yeah, great idea." And we did them 6 at a time. And so we got people like Lucy Sussex to do them. Sean McMullen did one of them. Isabel Carmody did 2. Gary Crew, Justin Darth. Some of the leading authors around the country. James Roy, Sir Brugman, Pamela Freeman. Quite a few names that you probably know. So we basically put together what we call the Bible, the guidelines, and it listed all the characters that we wanted the authors to use. It told people about Quintaris. In other words, it was set in early 14th century Renaissance Florence. Same population, about 100,000 or so. Although one of the authors put 150,000, I think that got through, but there was a minor discrepancy. Circumference was about 3 kilometres, and what made our little Renaissance Florence fantasy world, we had this rift cave at the back, a rift mountainside basically, with all these little rift caves. So characters from around the world of Amlis would come to Quintaris, pay their toll to get through the gates, and they would go adventuring. And the gateways, the pathways, or rift worlds were very dangerous, of course. Sometimes they'd close on people, trapping them inside other worlds. Some worlds would be, they'd get killed, but those who successfully found their treasure or their antidotes for diseases or whatever they were looking for, they'd come back and have to pay, a certain percentage to get back through the gates. And that's how Quintaris made all its money, of course. It's this gateway to other worlds. So all those authors would come up with their own plots, but they would be set within the world of Quintaris or in one of the rift worlds. So we gave them all the information. The reason you do that, of course, is because you can imagine someone writing book 30, they wouldn't want to read all those books just to write a book. So we made it simple for them. Whenever someone added something to a character, we would write that into the guidelines and give that to the next author. And being a shared world, all the books were standalones, so you didn't have to read them sequentially. And I think that's something the publisher never understood. and something that maybe the booksellers didn't understand because they'd never seen a shared world before, and something that maybe the schools didn't quite understand. The amount of times we got people saying to us, "Oh, what's book 1? What's book 2?" So, there's no book 1. There's no book 2. You can read book 30, book 20, book 1. Doesn't matter. They all stand alone. So of course you couldn't have Quintaris being destroyed in a book without it being re-established at the end of the book, because then that would sort of throw the whole idea out. In fact, the publisher at the end, when it looked as though Hachette was going to close the line down, said, "Well, maybe the last book you could have Quintaris being destroyed." And I thought, "Oh God, after doing 30 books, I just didn't quite understand that, no, we can't have Quintaris being destroyed as the last book." It didn't work that way. But that was one series we did. Another book, a series I wrote, the Jalindal Chronicles, is very sort of basic premise. This character, alien creature, comes down to Earth, and it's a Malshir, but each individual link confers power. So it might be mind reading, it might be control of animals, it might be invisibility, it could be anything. It would sort of take on the attributes of past wearers. So if you're a mathematician, for instance, this ring might get that. So the next person who wears it suddenly has the brain of this great mathematician, whatever. And all these links, of course, all these religious people find out about it, and they're all slaying one another to get as many links as they can. So you've got these powerful people throughout the history of Quasar, which is the world, being these champion swordsmen, champion this and champion that. And of course it dawns on this small group of people like Jalindal and her two companions, Daratai and Zimik, that these people weren't champions at all. They were just wearing one of these rings. And they were masters and heroes of their time. So they set out to gather all the links to destroy them. And in the end it turns out that once all the links were put together, then the sentient being is alive again, and it looks for surrogates. So it can actually gain control of the world and the universe, etc. So that pans over four books. They're all about 100,000 words long. So that was quite fun to write.
And what is the target age group for that one?
Young adult.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or new adult, as they call it these days. But adults read it. You know, I've had librarians email in the past and say that they've read it and they highly recommend it to their students, what have you. So that's nice. It's still selling, the series. It's up in Rockhampton. We did this literary luncheon where 10 of us gave a talk, like a 5-10 minute talk, and this librarian up there actually bought the whole series, which was nice to see. So hopefully she'll enjoy it if she reads it and start promoting it. And my recent series is the Maximus Black Files, and basically he's, you know, I always got fed up with reading literature where the bad guy always loses. As a kid I didn't read books, I read comics, and the bad guys never won. So I wanted to write a series about a bad guy actually, and he's really bad, Max. He's just a killer, psychopath really. So Maximus wants to rule the universe basically by searching for this armada of dreadnoughts, which no one knows where this armada is, but there's a set of 3 coordinates where once you get the 3 coordinates together you'll know where the armada is. So it's his quest, actually looking for this armada, and along the way he kills a lot of people. But he's got a nemesis, and that's Anarchy Longshadow, who's part of this organisation called RIM, and she thwarts him throughout. She's every bit as good as he is, of course. So you've got strong male and female character, each having a go at one another, and throughout the series. And it's space opera, I suppose, but
and it's an anti-hero thing. And that's
an anti-hero thing.
You said you wrote that a long time ago, but those things, that style of book is much more in now, so you were ahead of your time.
That's what I tell people, just ahead of my time. That's why I didn't sell initially. But look, just about every book I've written has been rejected, you know, time and again. Little Unknown Stories with Dragon Links, the first book in the Jalindal Chronicles, that was rejected by every publisher in Australia. Basically, well, not back, about 10 publishers I sent it to. It was written in 1999 or 98, and Erica Wagner left Penguin Books, the publisher there, and Laura Harris took over, and I thought, oh well, I'll send it back to them without telling them that they've already not rejected it, and they took it. So that's how Penguin came to take that on. Another series of mine, I think you asked earlier on about whether I had any advice for publicists and authors. I answered the publicist thing. I didn't answer the author part because we moved on. But basically, one word for aspiring authors, and that's persistence. Because I mentioned the beckoning before. 25 years in the making of getting that published. Limelight Chronicles, Knockback Waverley, published in the country. Finally published by Penguin, and it's still in print now. And there are other examples. I had a trilogy published in the US. The first 2 books were by Tor, and The Earthborn was rejected by every publisher. Even Lothian, who was my publisher, rejected it for whatever reason. And then it sold to Tor, and of course, I think the advance was $15,000, which was unheard of for me. My usual advance in Australia, well, Lothian was only paying $2,000 advances. So, in a sense, I was happy that Tor published. Of course, I was overseas, but I was a bit disappointed at the time that I couldn't get that series published in Australia. But so it was eventually published in the US. So you get a lot of people who just give up on their work. I think if it gets rejected once or twice, I think it's no good. I've had so many people tell me, "Oh yeah, I wrote a book once and put it in the bottom drawer." Who's the guy who wrote, I can never remember his name, but I know the book, Confederacy of Dunces. I think it won the Pulitzer Prize for Literature. He committed suicide because he couldn't get it published. His mother persisted with it, and she found someone like an English professor or something who went over the manuscript and might have typed it up. I don't know the whole story there, but it actually was published and won the Pulitzer Prize. It's a bit of a shame that the guy gave up when he did, but it's just a matter of persistence, and just always, if you believe in what you've written and you think it's reasonably good, taking on board advice from editors. If I get an editor's letter in saying, well, it could be improved in this way, if I sort of can see their point or agree with them, I'll change it. But if not, I'll stick with what I've got.
You're mentioning editors more and more. How important is editing to the process, the publishing process?
It's important in as much that if you've got a good editor, and unfortunately, a lot of my books have been published in education, and sometimes, they go off on a beaten track, and you think to yourself, where's this person coming from? Because, without sounding big-headed, if you've got a lot of experience in writing, you sort of got a pretty good idea of what you're doing. And if you've got someone, my partner Meredith, she's always calling me and saying, "Oh God, look what this editor's done," and they've just made a mess of something, just a complete mess. They've spelt things wrong, and it's normally an assistant. You always seem to I think the better known you are, the more established you are, the more they think, "Oh, we'll put this, beginner on them." You don't get the good editor, you get the beginner because, well, they know what they're doing, so they'll help the apprentice editor along. I seriously think that's what happens. And then you get all these things, and sometimes you think to yourself, what are they talking about? That's just not right. So Meredith and I had these little slanging matches about these editors. But get a good editor, and boy, they can just lift something time and time again. I mean, I'm publishing a book, I won't tell you who it is because I don't want to find out I'm talking about them, but the outline, I bought this book on an outline, which I normally don't do, but this is quite an established author. So I thought, well, that sounds really great. So I accepted it. And when she delivered the book, it just had so much wrong with it. I thought, I don't believe this. So I went through it. Then I gave it to Gemma, who I told you before is my publishing assistant, who's done the editing course. She's really an editor now. But and she went through it and she picked up so many things, ways to improve this book, and it's gone back to this author 3 times now. And I think really, I've run out of time. I mentioned scheduling before. I've had to schedule this. It's got to go to the printer now. If it doesn't, I've missed the schedule. It's not going to get done until next year now. So if we want it out this year, it's got to be done. Which a major publisher probably would maybe hold it back. I don't know. Sometimes you've got to make those decisions. But I think if it went back another 3 times, it might reach its full potential. But some authors, I suspect, this one in particular, will agree that these points the editor make are valid, but they'll do cosmetic changes. So they'll just go, "Oh yeah, okay, I've forgotten to mention Frank. Well, here you are, bang, we'll add a line here, and now I've mentioned Frank, it's like, yeah, you've mentioned him, but he's still not doing anything, You might have said in your editorial letter, well, Frank disappears halfway through this book. It doesn't get mentioned again. So someone doing a cosmetic fix will throw in a line, oh, whatever happened to Frank? Oh, he went overseas. Well, Frank may as well not be in the book if that's all you're going to do.
Yeah.
So when you multiply that by 10, 15 times, you think, well, yeah, they've addressed all your queries, but they've just done a cosmetic job. They haven't rewritten anything really. They've just added a few lines just to cover that base. But so if you get a good editor, an author who's willing to follow those good suggestions, that really does lift the book. I think people would be quite surprised at the amount of work that goes into some of these books by their favourite authors. Like you read a book and you think, oh yeah, he's a great author. But I could mention a few people right now who are dyslexic, they can't spell. So for a start, all that is fixed for them. Other people, great ideas. There's some authors out there that I've worked with that basically their stories almost have to be rewritten. Come out with good ideas and you know, they win awards, etc. Not the best writers. They've just come out with the idea.
And they've got a good team.
Got a good team behind them that I've never seen, basically. But that's the way it goes. So when they first started, they must have had an editor with an astute eye as to what can be made good. You know, what was the name? Fox and Possum Magic. I think that was written, rewritten. I think originally it was a rat. I think it was a Jane Covington and her partner. I can't remember the partner's name. When they were at Omnibus, actually spotted this as a book with potential, you know, with potential, and they moulded that book, and a lot of work went into it. It wasn't just it was possum magic. It was about this possum, and you know, it's like what a fantastic book. A lot of work went into it, but that's behind the scenes that people never hear.
Yeah, and that's a particularly iconic example.
Yeah, well, it's probably more represented in libraries than any other book in Australia.
Yes.
At schools, etc.
Do you have any, you know, you've been on both sides of the author-editor relationship. Do you have any particular advice for authors or editors?
For the authors, I've mentioned that before, just persistence, keep at it. Just because you get a rejection. Harry Potter was rejected by 10 or 11 publishers before Bloomsbury took it on, so there's a perfect example of persistence.
Yes.
In fact, JK was lucky that she had an agent that was persistent, because most agents would give up after 2 or 3 submissions because it costs money to post out those manuscripts. And if you want them back, you know, return posters, etc. Most publishers don't really want emailed submissions, so I'd say she was very lucky to have the agent that she did at the time. I think she dropped him later on, but if not for him, she wouldn't have got those books published in the first place. But as for editors, it's so hard getting work as an editor these days too, because they've got editing courses all over the place, so they're pumping out all these new editors, and the publishers are sort of diminishing. I think if you want work these days, you'd be looking at digital. If you can get work with a digital publisher and do a freelance, because I think we've had about 15 interns come through Ford Street in the last few years, and probably about 6 of them wound up getting jobs. But the others, I don't think they've got jobs in editing.
With regards, I realise that you're a professional publisher, but with regards to self-publishing, would you have any advice to authors who are self-publishing about, you know, getting an editor maybe?
It would definitely help. I met a lady at the Monday Markets some years ago when I was up there doing Voices on the Coast. They have a festival up there. So anyway, I went to the Monday Markets, and there was this woman selling these self-published books. And funnily enough, she was here yesterday. She came to talk to me about publishing this book of hers. And while I was standing there, she sold a couple of books, and she said she sells about 30, 40 a day at this market, which I found at the time hard to believe, but you know, I sort of walked past a couple of times and saw her selling books, so I could see that she was selling. And she came yesterday, she teed up a meeting, and she wants me to publish her book, and I quite like it actually, but the whole design, the editing, she had the commas and the quote marks around the wrong way in the dialogue. I mean, it was just awful, the whole design. And I said to her, well look, you'd have to lose the illustrator for a start, because the illustrations were awful. And she's saying, yeah, but I was selling these. And I said, well, that's all very well. You're sitting in a market hand selling them. Big difference to putting this against, say, books like this on a bookshelf. Someone's going to look at yours and look at these. They're going to go for these every time. Maybe not in the markets where you're hand selling your book. And so I had to sort of talk to her about that. And I think she realised that the artwork wasn't up to scratch. But it desperately needed editing. I saw these sort of typos, and she used the inside back cover for one of the spreads. The whole design, everything was wrong about the book. And of course, in her mind, she's saying, well, I don't know how many she printed. She said 10,000. She's got 5 copies left. And whether that's true or not, I don't know. But according to her, she sold almost 10,000 copies of this book, which by any standards is a bloody good sales. I don't think any of our books have sold 10,000 copies, and I've got national distribution with 2 distributors. But she hand sells them. And looking at the design and everything, I thought to myself, God, you know, I suppose a lot of people, when they're in a market situation, she said one lady bought 10 copies. I suppose they're not looking at the art, they're just looking at the concept. And what I spoke to you about before was the idea of something, so they can see that this is a good idea. And that's all they're looking at. So some people aren't sort of looking at the obvious, and that is the artwork and the editing and stuff like that. Most people probably wouldn't even notice that those commas and quote marks were around the wrong way, but there you go. So her book, I think, would have been vastly improved if she'd had an editor and she'd had a designer who knew what they were doing, because she's obviously just got the artwork, she's got the manuscript, she's given it to a printer and said print. That's basically what I did when I first started publishing as well, so I can see where she's coming from. But, so you really do need a designer, and yeah, you definitely need an editor. If you look at any self-published book that hasn't been edited, you're going to see typos everywhere, and someone might say, so what? So it's got typos, what's the big deal? That's fine too. But if you want to get it into libraries, if you want booksellers to take you seriously, and if you want the better read people getting behind it, reviewers. I mean, do you want your book reviewed by a reviewer who's going to say, yeah, shame about the spelling mistakes, and shame about the typos, oh, the design's atrocious.
I recently published a review that was exactly like that. It's like, great story idea, really needed an editor. And I wasn't the reviewer, it was Evie Kendall, and it was a sci-fi book. And she said it was a great idea.
I wonder if it's the same one Sean McMullen was telling me about the other day. He said he had a book given to him by this author who's self-published, and he said desperately needed editing and someone to proofread, and there were all these spelling mistakes and everything like that, so it's probably the same book. But, you know, that's not going to get you anywhere. No. It's a shame, because, you know, how much is an editor going to cost? Maybe $500, $1,000 tops. And if you want your book out there as best as it can be, that's what you've got to do.
Yep. Yeah.
But then I wouldn't be advising anyone to self-publish anyway without distribution, because where's the book going to go? Who's going to read it? You might have a book signing with all your mates and sell 20, 30 copies maybe. Without a distributor, you're probably not going to get into the school system, which if it's an adult book, that wouldn't be on the cards for you anyway. But how are you going to get into bookshops? Most bookshops won't deal with individual people walking in off the street. Too much paperwork, not worth their while. Not going to do it. So you've got 3,000 friends on Facebook. I've got 3,000 friends on Facebook, but hardly any of them actually email me and say, hey, we want this book you're talking about. In fact, I might get one email once in a month or something like that. So you're not going to sell them through Facebook or Twitter either. I don't know where people sell their self-published. I think they wind up with a garage full of boxes. That's what I think happens to them in the main. There are superlatives. You can always find someone who says, oh, well, I know someone who, in the paper the other day, that woman self-published, I think 50 Shades of Grey might be an example. Well, that's 1 in a million. You can talk about the 1 in a million and say, yeah, well, it worked for her. She self-published a blog and someone picked up on it, and it sold God knows how many copies, but for most people, 99.9% of us, it's not going to work.
But that's like the guy who goes gold mining and comes back with the nugget that's this big. It's like, well, how many other people managed to do that?
Yeah, well, not many.
So what are the highlights of your career so far?
Well, I suppose getting my first book published, that was a long road. I actually had a company called Partage bought 2 children's books of mine, both of which have now sold. The Earthborn, that sold to Tor in the end, and The Wizard's Torment sold to HarperCollins in '95. And both of those books were taken up by an education publisher, and I thought I'd found my little niche. I mean, I think every author's got their niche, and you just got to find that niche. I thought mine might be the hard-boiled character I wrote a few sort of crime sort of books that didn't sell. And I really loved writing them. They were like that Robert Barrett, Wouldn't Be Dead for Quids. Did you ever read Robert Barrett? He's a bestseller. He sold like 100,000 copies, but he's basically about a bouncer who works in this hotel. Les Norton, I think his name was. They're great books, just good reads, not literature as such. He's since died, unfortunately, Robert Barrett. He wrote a whole stack of books for HarperCollins. He was one of their bestsellers. So I wrote these sort of books, but they didn't really sell. The short stories did. I sold a stack of short stories, adult short stories. But anyway, I wrote these 2 books and had them accepted, had the contract. I've still got the contracts now. And suddenly the publisher just disappeared. So for a while there I was thinking, yes, get into children's. This was in about 1982, 83. But it wasn't until 95 I actually sold the first of those, and then about 2000 I sold The Earthborn. So that was a highlight, selling to HarperCollins. Starting publishing again was another highlight, even the first publishing void. Receiving the A. Bertram Chandler Award and the Peter McNamara Awards, Lifetime Achievement, they came as surprises, I must say. So that was quite nice.
Probably not quite so much a surprise to everyone else in the community.
Yeah, thank you, I think.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I hadn't been involved in science fiction for a long time, so getting the A. Bertram all of a sudden, in fact, they didn't even notify me. It was at SwanCon, I think, last year, year before.
Yeah.
And Sue Bastinsky called me and said, congratulations. I said, what for? And she said, oh, you've just been awarded the A. Bertram Channel Award. So that was nice. I suppose they were the highlights. Selling to Penguin for the first time, that was another highlight. And of course, I sold 3 anthologies to them. I had this little dream of selling a science fiction, horror and fantasy anthology to them, which I wound up doing, so that was quite an achievement. The anthology was actually Australia's first fantasy anthology. It was called Dreamweavers. And back in those days, hardly anyone was writing fantasy, or certainly no one was really well known. This was before people like Garth Nix and people like that. So it was a struggle really to get that many fantasy writers together. And Isabel Carmody was about the best known one. She had a story in it. And Sean McMullen, a couple of other people, but yeah, it was hard getting enough stories for that. These days, you'd fill an anthology that thick with the fantasy writers.
Yes.
They weren't around those days.
What's the thing that's on the top of your bucket list?
Having an office, basically. I'd like an office. That's what I'd like. If someone could come along and give me about $500,000 to buy an office, that'd be great, or even afford the rent for an office. I think to get established or to get highly successful, I think you've got to take all these things in just little steps. One of the steps is getting sales, distribution, getting better known authors to actually trust their books with you. And
yes.
I've done that, with Isabel Carmody, for example, Sean McMullen, Gary Crew, because that gives you credibility.
Yes.
You can publish no end of unknown. I've got a stack of manuscripts there by unknown people. They're a dime a dozen. But to get better known people, Suzanne Gervais, Anna Pignataro as an illustrator, some of these well-known people coming to work for you, that really builds you up. Sean Tan's given me work in the past for my anthologies. So that's one of those things. To actually make money at publishing, which I do now, that's another step. Because if you keep losing money, what are you doing? You may as well just give it up. You can lose money for so long, but then you've got to say to yourself, well, this is never going anywhere. And that's the stage I reached back in the mid-80s. When that distributor disappeared, owing me all that money, I just thought, well, this is ridiculous. I've got no stock now, I'm starting from scratch, and it's taken me this long to get here, and now I've got right back down to the bottom again, so I'm not doing it.
Yes.
So I stopped doing it. And I think the next step for me, one step was getting distribution overseas. And unfortunately, I ran foul of a very dubious crowd. I met the woman, she was religious, and she showed me a PowerPoint of their operation, and everything was way above board, looked fantastic, took me to the website, showed me all the people they represent, all above board. Wound up sending 2 shipments of my books over there, and to this day I haven't received a cent, because they've got this little scam going, and they've caught other publishers in Australia. They've got this little scam going whereby they they charge you 40% for sales, but they charge you 40% for returns. And no one I know charges 40% for returns. It can't work that way. If you get as many returns as you've got sales, then obviously you're going nowhere and you've just lost all your books. It can't possibly work like that. It wasn't in the contract. So, comes to then wanting the third shipment of books. I said, well, I'm just going to wait until I get some money here, because so far I've not received any money. Oh yes, but that's because your books fell into this period, and you know, they had a reason behind it all. But I thought, no, just hang on a second. So what they do is they've, and this is my guess here, what they've got is a shelf company, and they sell 20 books, and they know that they've legitimately sold 20 books. So their shelf company sends them 20 books back at 40% return rate. You're getting 40% for these sales, and they cancel one another out. Or they give a few more books to their shelf company. So actually you're going backwards. You owe them money. So they've got all your books, but you owe them money. And that's the stage where at the moment, when I get these statements, I don't even read them, because it's just garbage. It's just I've been ripped off, and I don't want to know. And there's nothing I can do about it. So, going back to where we began, that is another level. Getting distribution overseas would be a level. I'm skipping that level because it's just too fraught with danger. I've already been there. I've lost about $4,000, not including the stock. $4,000 it cost me to freight them over there. That's how much I've lost, plus the stock. So my next level now is, or another level might be getting grants. I did receive 3 grants for publishing 3 books at one point, but I've not been terribly successful in getting grants. That's another level that you really want to reach, because then that's guaranteeing you're not going to lose money on those books. Next level is getting an office, and I think that will give another bit of credibility to Ford Street. If I've actually got an office, I can get more interns in here. Obviously, working from home, I've got a partner, a non-business partner, who doesn't really want strangers in the house all the time, which is understandable. So if I've got too many interns in here coming in every day, that would be a bit of a strain. So I can only have really 1 or 2 on the same day. That gets it out of the way for the rest of the week. But with an office, and I'm talking about a bit of warehouse space, that's where I'm heading. That would be the next level. Going up into an office where I can actually get staff coming in and say, right, this is what you're doing today, get them on the net, doing marketing, publicity, all the things that I just can't always get to.
So you definitely have a plan.
I have a plan, not a business plan. People say to me, well, what was your business plan? I don't have a business plan. This is what you do. You start out, you get a book, you get a manuscript, you like it, you get a designer, you get the editing, unless you do it yourself. And it's the same formula I followed many years ago. If not for that distributor disappearing with all my stock and my money, I would have possibly just still been publishing science fiction. But as the small presses in Australia will attest, without that distribution, and even with distribution, as you were saying before, you know, if you're selling 1,000 books, 1,000 books really, it's a hard slog. And to sell those 1,000 books, you're doing a lot of publicity and marketing, all that sort of stuff. I am publishing because I expect that to be a career. So it's a career for me. It's not something I do as a hobby. Like it was a hobby back in the 80s, because I had my bookshop, and you know, beyond that door there, that's sort of Corrie and Collins, I think it was called back in those days. These days, I do intend this to be a career, and yeah, it's making money now. It's taking me the first books I published 2007, Sean Mullins and Justin Darth's books. But it's got to a stage now where I've got my databases, I've got the contacts, I'm going to the schools and various distribution outlets. And providing all keeps going the way it is now, it's fine.
So you're just rolling.
I'm rolling, on a roll.
Ford Street, that's how you roll.
That's it.
Well, thank you very much for talking to Darth Matter.
Thank you for coming around and talking to me.